Welcome to Monk's Moon Temple. Find yourself a comfortable position, sitting upright in a chair with your feet flat on the floor, or lying down if that suits you better. Close your eyes if that feels natural, or soften your gaze. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, let go of whatever you were doing before this moment. For the next hours together, we're going to explore something that has the power to fundamentally shift how you experience everything. I want to begin with a story about a man named Thomas who worked as a financial analyst. Thomas was exceptionally good at his job because he craved certainty. He needed to know the numbers, predict the trends, and be absolutely sure about his recommendations. This need spilled into every area of his life. He needed to know his wife still loved him, so he would ask her repeatedly. He needed to know his children were safe, so he would text them constantly. Thomas lived in a state of quiet, constant vigilance. One weekend, his wife surprised him with a trip to the mountains. No agenda, no itinerary, no reservations. For Thomas, this was not a gift. It was a nightmare. He spent the first day trying to find hotels, researching restaurants, calculating routes. His wife finally took his phone and said, "Thomas, for one day, can you just let the road unfold? Can you just experience the mountains without knowing their height first?" Thomas sat in the passenger seat, his hands empty, his mind racing. And then slowly something shifted. He started to notice the color of the sky changing. He felt the cool air through the cracked window. He heard his children laughing. For the first time in years, he was not analyzing. He was present. What Thomas stumbled upon is the doorway into one of the most profound teachings of Buddhism, the teaching of emptiness, or in Sanskrit, Śūnyatā. This word has been badly misunderstood. When many people hear it, they think of nihilism, of nothingness. Nothing could be further from the truth. Emptiness, properly understood, is not a doctrine of despair. It is a doctrine of radical freedom. It is the key that unlocks the cage of the self. The Buddha himself used this word carefully. He compared misunderstanding emptiness to mishandling a venomous snake. If you grasp it wrongly, it will turn and bite you. But if you grasp it correctly, its power becomes medicine. It becomes the antidote to the deepest suffering. Before we dive into the first dimension, I want to offer you a simple practice. It is the practice of the open hand. Right now, clench one of your hands into a tight fist. Squeeze it as hard as you can. Feel the tension. Now slowly open your hand. Spread your fingers wide. Feel the release. This is the posture we need for understanding emptiness. Not a fist that grasps at certainty, but an open hand willing to receive. If this journey is resonating with you, if loosening your grip on certainty feels like relief, I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Moon Temple. By subscribing, you tell the algorithms that content like this matters. It costs nothing and helps us continue creating these long-form explorations. Just click the button below. Now let us begin our exploration of the first dimension of emptiness. It is the emptiness of the self. Not the philosophical self, but the self you feel yourself to be right now. The self that worries about the future. The self that regrets the past. The Buddha looked directly at this self and made a radical statement: this self is empty of independent existence. You exist. The experience of being a person is undeniable. But the Buddha asked not whether you exist, but how you exist. He asked whether the self is a solid, permanent thing, or something more fluid, more like a process. Imagine a campfire. You sit around it watching flames dance. You say, "Look at that beautiful fire." But what is a fire really? If you try to pick it up and hold it, it burns you and disappears. A fire is not a substance. It is an event. It is the visible expression of a process: fuel consumed, oxygen combined, energy released. Without wood, it goes out. Without oxygen, it extinguishes. The fire has no independent existence apart from its causes and conditions. The Buddha said yourself is like that fire. It is an event, not a thing. It is the ongoing process of sensing, perceiving, feeling, thinking, and acting. These 5 processes are constantly changing, constantly flowing. The self you were 5 minutes ago is already gone. The self you will be tomorrow has not yet arrived. What you call me is actually a river of experience, flowing so smoothly that it creates the illusion of a solid bank. Consider this directly. Right now, you are hearing my voice. That hearing happens without any effort. Sound waves enter your ears, your brain processes them, and sound appears in awareness. Where is the you in that process? Is there a little person inside your head who decides to hear? No. Hearing simply happens when conditions are right. The same is true of thinking. Thoughts arise unbidden. You don't choose most of them. Where is the you who thinks these thoughts? Is there a thinker behind the thoughts, or just the thinking itself? This is the first meaning of emptiness. It is not that you don't exist. It is that the way you exist is not the way you think you exist. You are not a solid, separate self standing apart from experience. You are the ever-changing, ever-flowing process of experience itself. Recognizing this, truly feeling it, is the beginning of a freedom you may have never thought possible. Thank you for continuing this journey with me. Let us take another breath together. Breathe in slowly, and as you exhale, let go of any need to remember everything we discussed. There is nothing to grasp. Just remain present, open, and curious. Now we arrive at the second dimension of emptiness, and it comes to us through one of the greatest philosophers in human history, a man named Nagarjuna who lived in India around the 2nd century. If the Buddha pointed out that the self is empty, Nagarjuna looked at everything else and asked a daring question. What about the world out there? Are objects any more solid than the self? Nagarjuna's answer was a profound no. Just as the self is empty of independent existence, so too is everything you can perceive. This is the second meaning of emptiness, the emptiness of objects. Nothing possesses its own independent essence. Nothing stands alone. Let me illustrate this with a story about a woman named Priya who worked as a botanist. Priya loved plants with a passion that bordered on devotion. She could identify thousands of species by their leaves alone. One day, while hiking in a rainforest, she came across a flower she had never seen before. It was extraordinary. She spent hours photographing it, collecting samples, imagining the scientific papers she would write. But then a local guide walked past and said something in his language that meant, "Ah, you found the grandmother flower. We use it in ceremonies to welcome rain." Priya was stunned. This flower she had framed as a scientific discovery had been known and loved for generations. It was not just a specimen. It was a grandmother. It was part of a story, a culture, a relationship with the land. In that moment, Priya realized something profound. The flower was not one thing. It was many things. A botanical specimen to her. A sacred being to the village. Food for insects. Compost waiting to happen. Which one was the real flower? All of them and none of them. The flower had no single, fixed identity. Its essence depended entirely on the web of relationships in which it was embedded. This is exactly what Nagarjuna taught. Everything that exists does so only in dependence on everything else. He called this dependent origination. Nothing comes into being on its own. Nothing remains the same. Everything is a product of causes and conditions stretching back infinitely. Think about the device you are using right now. To the person who mined the minerals, it is labor. To the child who plays games, it is entertainment. To the environmentalist, it is toxic waste. To you right now, it is a portal to this voice. Which is the true identity? None exclusively. All simultaneously. Its existence is a conversation between countless factors, none of which can be separated from the whole. Nagarjuna used a famous image to convey this. He said things exist like a flame in a lamp. The flame depends on the wick, depends on the oil, depends on the oxygen, depends on the person who lit it. Without any of these, there is no flame. And yet the flame is not identical to any of them. Every single thing in your experience is exactly like that flame. You are like that flame. I am like that flame. This moment of listening is like that flame. Now you might ask, if everything is empty, does that mean nothing exists at all? This is the misunderstanding Nagarjuna fought against his entire life. Emptiness is not the denial of existence. It is the denial that things exist the way we think they do, as separate, solid, self-contained units. Things do exist, but they exist relationally. They exist as events, not as substances. They exist as verbs, not as nouns. Consider a wave in the ocean. You can see it, you can name it, you can watch it rise and fall. But is the wave a separate thing? Can it exist apart from the ocean? Of course not. The wave is the ocean, momentarily appearing in a particular form. Its entire being is borrowed from the ocean. It has no independent waveness. And yet the wave is real. You can surf on it. You can be moved by its beauty. Its reality is not diminished by its lack of independence. It is simply a different kind of reality. Nagarjuna said the same is true of everything. The mountain is the earth, momentarily appearing as a peak. The cloud is the sky, momentarily appearing as vapor. Your body is the universe, momentarily appearing as a temporary form. Nothing stands alone. Everything inters with everything else. This teaching has a profoundly practical dimension. When you see that everything is interdependent, your relationship to the world transforms. You can no longer see yourself as separate from the trees you walk past, separate from the strangers on the street. Their well-being becomes your well-being because the web connects us all. Their suffering becomes your suffering because separation is an illusion. Nagarjuna believed this insight is the essence of walking the Buddhist path. To see interdependence is to see that your suffering is also dependent on causes and conditions. And if you can understand those causes, you can begin to untangle them. Your suffering is not a solid, permanent thing either. It is a flame that can be extinguished when its fuel is removed. This is not abstract philosophy. This is the most practical wisdom imaginable. When you are anxious, instead of believing you are an anxious person, you can ask, what are the causes giving rise to this anxiety? When you are angry, instead of identifying with the anger, you can investigate the conditions feeding it. Emptiness gives you distance from your experience. It allows you to see your thoughts and emotions not as who you are, but as weather patterns arising and passing away in the vast sky of awareness. Let us continue our journey together. Take another breath, a slow deep breath in, and as you exhale, feel yourself settling more deeply into this moment. There is nowhere to get to, nothing to achieve. Just this. We have explored the emptiness of the self and the emptiness of objects. Now we arrive at a third dimension that may stretch your mind in unexpected ways. It comes from a school of Buddhist philosophy called Yogacara, whose practitioners were deep meditators, sometimes called the mind-only school. They asked a question that strikes at the very heart of how we experience reality. If there is no solid self and no solid world, what is the relationship between the two? What is this thing we call experience? The Yogacarans discovered something remarkable. The division between subject and object, between the one who experiences and the thing experienced, is itself empty. This is the third meaning of emptiness. There is no experiencer on one side and experienced on the other. There is only the single, unified field of experiencing. Let me share a story about a man named Carlos who was a professional chef. Carlos had worked in kitchens for 30 years. He was known for his precision, his exacting standards, his ability to taste a sauce and identify every single ingredient. Cooking was his identity. One evening, after a particularly stressful dinner service, he stayed late alone in the kitchen. He was exhausted, running on fumes. He decided to make himself a simple pasta, nothing fancy, just garlic, olive oil, a little chili. As he stood at the stove, something shifted. He was not thinking about the recipe. He was not thinking about the critics or the customers or the reviews. He was just there. His hand reached for the garlic. He felt the weight of the knife, the resistance of the clove, the release of the aroma. He watched the oil shimmer in the pan. He heard the gentle sizzle as the garlic touched the heat. He inhaled the fragrance filling the air. And in that moment, there was no Carlos the chef performing an act of cooking. There was just cooking. There was just the garlic releasing its essence, the oil changing temperature, the aroma traveling through space. Carlos was not separate from any of it. He was part of the event. Later, he tried to describe this to his wife. He said, "For a few minutes, I wasn't cooking dinner. I was dinner cooking itself through me." This is the Yogacara insight. In deep presence, the illusion of separation dissolves. There is no subject standing apart from the object, observing it, manipulating it. There is only the seamless flow of experience, appearing as cook, appearing as garlic, appearing as aroma, but all of it one fabric. Consider how you normally experience the world. It feels like you are in here, behind your eyes, looking out at a world that is over there. There is a subject here and an object there. But the Yogacarans ask, where exactly is the boundary? Where does you end and the world begin? Is your seeing of this text located inside your head? If so, where in your head? Can you find it? Or is the seeing happening right here where the text appears? The more you look, the more elusive the boundary becomes. Think about a dream you have had. In the dream, you are you. You walk through a dream landscape. You meet dream people, hear dream sounds, feel dream emotions. In the dream, there is a clear subject and clear objects. But when you wake up, you realize the entire thing, the you, the landscape, the people, the sounds, was all made of the same stuff. It was all your mind. The separation was a complete illusion. The Yogacarans suggest our waking state is like that. The feeling of a me in here looking out at a world out there is the fundamental illusion. In reality, the me and the world are both appearances arising in the same vast field of awareness. The color blue you see and the experience of seeing blue are not two things. They are one thing. The seer and the seen are one movement of reality experiencing itself. I once spoke with a musician named Anita who played the cello. She suffered from terrible performance anxiety. She described her experience as a constant battle between herself and the music, between herself and the audience, between herself and the instrument. One night during a performance, something broke open. She was playing a Bach suite, a piece she had played hundreds of times. Midway through, the anxiety vanished. She later said there was no longer Anita playing the cello. There was just the music playing itself. The cello was playing. The hall was playing. The silence between the notes was playing. She had become the music. This is not mystical poetry. This is a direct description of what happens when the subject-object divide collapses. And the Yogacarans say this collapse is not a special event reserved for saints and musicians. It is the true nature of every moment. We just overlay it with the habit of separation. Now here is where it gets really interesting. The Yogacarans concluded that the entire world we experience, everything we take to be solid and external, is actually produced by the mind. They did not mean the world is a hallucination or that tables and chairs do not exist. They meant that the world as we experience it, with all its qualities, colors, sounds, textures, meanings, is constructed by consciousness. The mind and its objects arise together. They are codependent. One cannot exist without the other. This leads to their most famous and misunderstood claim, consciousness only. Not that only consciousness exists and the world is an illusion. But that what we call world and what we call mind are two names for the same reality viewed from different angles. It is like the front and back of your hand. They seem different, but they are the same hand. If this feels difficult to grasp, that is perfectly natural. The Yogacarans said ultimate reality cannot be captured in concepts. It cannot be thought. It can only be directly experienced. And when it is experienced, the experiencer disappears into the experience. There is no one left to report back. There is only the seamless, luminous, self-aware fabric of being. Thank you for continuing to walk this path with me. Take a breath, a long slow breath, and let your awareness rest in the simple sensation of air moving in and out of your body. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. We come now to the fourth dimension of emptiness, and I must warn you, it sounds like a complete contradiction to everything we have discussed. You have heard that the self is empty, objects are empty, and even the division between subject and object is empty. So what is left? Is reality just a void, a nothing, a blank? The answer from a later, beautiful, and controversial tradition within Buddhism is a resounding no. This is the teaching of Tathagata Garbha, often translated as Buddha nature or Buddha womb. It proposes that at the very core of your being, hidden beneath layers of conditioned thoughts and feelings, lies something not empty of qualities. It lies the fully awakened, radiant, and compassionate nature of a Buddha itself. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Grace who worked as a hospice nurse. Grace spent her days with people who were dying. She held their hands, listened to their fears, sat with them in the silence of their final hours. She was good at her job because she was present, because she did not try to fix anything. She just stayed. One afternoon, she sat with an elderly man named Arthur who had not spoken in days. Suddenly, Arthur opened his eyes and looked directly at her. He said, "I've spent my whole life trying to become someone. And now, at the very end, I realize I've always been no one. But that no one is filled with so much love I cannot contain it." Arthur died a few hours later. Grace could not forget his words. Who was she really, beneath the roles of nurse, mother, wife, friend? What she found, after years of patient inquiry, was not a void. It was a presence. A silent, aware, loving presence that had always been there, unnoticed. This is Buddha nature. Think about it this way. You are watching a film. The film has characters, drama, suspense, joy, tragedy. You laugh, you cry, you grip your armrest. But throughout the entire film, the screen remains unchanged. The screen is not damaged by the explosions. It is not stained by the tears. It simply holds the entire movie without being affected. The Buddha nature teaching says your conscious awareness is the screen. Your thoughts, emotions, sensations, your sense of self, all of this is just content appearing on the screen. The screen is luminous, it illuminates whatever appears. It is empty, it has no form of its own, which is precisely why it can host any form. And crucially, it is untouched by the content. You can have a thought of anger, but the awareness that knows the anger is not angry. You can feel fear, but the awareness that knows the fear is not afraid. This awareness is not something you need to create or achieve. It is what you already are. The goal of practice, from this perspective, is not to build a better self. It is to realize that the self you have been trying to build is just temporary content. Your real identity is the screen itself. There is a beautiful ancient simile for this, the simile of the honey. Imagine a golden comb of honey, dripping with sweetness, hidden deep within a cave. But the entrance to the cave is swarming with a fierce hive of bees. A hungry traveler comes along. He can smell the honey, he knows it is there, but he cannot reach it because of the bees. The bees are our defilements, our greed, anger, ignorance, our neurotic habits. The honey is our Buddha nature, our true awakened essence. The traveler is us on the path. The teaching does not say we need to create the honey. The honey is already there. It says we need to learn skillful means to calm the bees and taste what has always been waiting. I saw this in a man named Frank, a retired military officer in his 70s. Frank was gruff, opinionated, set in his ways. His family found him difficult. One winter, his daughter convinced him to try a meditation class for veterans. He went reluctantly, expecting nothing. Something unexpected happened. In the silence, Frank encountered not his opinions, not his judgments, not his rigid certainties. He encountered a vast open space behind them all. He later told his daughter, "All my life I thought I was my positions. I thought I was what I believed. But underneath all that, there is something else. Something that was there before any of it. And that something is peaceful. It has always been peaceful. Frank did not become a different person overnight. He was still Frank. But something had shifted. The bees were still there, but he had tasted the honey. He knew now that his true nature was not the agitation on the surface but the stillness beneath. This is the promise of Buddha nature. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are the awareness in which anger and fear appear. And that awareness, your true nature, is already free, already complete, already whole. Now I must be honest with you. This teaching has been controversial. Some Buddhists see it as a betrayal of the original no-self doctrine. They worry it smuggles a permanent self back into Buddhism through the back door. Others see it as the natural completion of the emptiness teachings, the positive expression of what was only described negatively before. Both sides have valid points. The Buddha himself, when asked about the existence of a self, remained silent. When asked about the non-existence of a self, he remained silent again. Perhaps he knew that any answer in words would become another concept, another thing to grasp. The truth he pointed to lies beyond both existence and non-existence. It can be tasted but not captured. It can be lived but not fully described. Let us continue. Take another breath together, a deep breath in, and as you exhale, feel yourself arriving fully in this moment. Nothing to hold on to from before. Nothing to anticipate ahead. Just this breath, just this presence. We have journeyed through 5 dimensions of emptiness together. We have seen that the self is empty, a process rather than a thing. We have seen that objects are empty, dependent on endless causes and conditions. We have seen that the division between subject and object is empty, that experience is a unified field. We have touched the radiant ground of Buddha nature. And we have learned to hold all views lightly, knowing they are fingers pointing at the moon. Now we arrive at the question that matters most. So what? What does any of this have to do with your actual life? How does emptiness help you when you are anxious, grieving, angry, or lost? Let me tell you a story about a woman named Helen who came to these teachings not through philosophy but through sheer desperation. Helen was a mother of 3, a lawyer, a woman who had spent her entire life trying to hold everything together. She held together her children's schedules, her marriage, her career, her aging parents' needs. She was the pivot point around which everyone else's lives revolved. And she was exhausted, depleted, running on empty. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, she sat alone in her kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. The dishes were piled in the sink. The emails waited in her inbox. She looked at it all and felt nothing but a vast, hollow emptiness. Not the philosophical emptiness we have discussed. Just emptiness. Just a black hole where her motivation, her love, her energy used to be. In that moment of complete collapse, something shifted. She stopped trying to fix anything. She stopped making mental lists. She just sat there in the silence of her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life she could no longer sustain. And in that sitting, in that giving up, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt presence. Not Helen the supermom, not Helen the lawyer. Just presence. Just awareness, sitting in a kitchen, watching the moonlight on the dishes. Helen later told me that in that moment, she understood emptiness for the first time. Not as an idea, but as an experience. She saw that the self she had been killing herself to maintain, the perfect Helen who held everything together, was a fiction. It was a character she had been playing. And underneath that character, beneath all the roles and responsibilities, there was simply this. This awareness. This presence. This peace that had been there all along, unnoticed. This is the practical gift of emptiness. It gives you permission to stop. It gives you permission to fail, to drop the ball, to be imperfect, because the self that was supposed to be perfect was never real in the first place. The weight you have been carrying, the weight of being someone, the weight of maintaining an image, that weight is lifted when you see that the one who was supposed to carry it does not exist. Emptiness is not a doctrine of meaninglessness. It is a doctrine of immense responsibility and immense freedom. Responsibility because you see that everything is connected. Your actions ripple through the web. Your kindness matters. Your cruelty matters. You are not a separate self whose choices affect only you. You are a knot in a net, and every movement you make vibrates through the whole. And freedom because you see that you are not trapped in a fixed identity. You are not stuck being the person you have always been. You are a process, a flow, an ever-changing river. The mistakes of the past do not define you because the you who made them is already gone. The anxieties about the future do not define you because the you who might experience them has not yet arrived. There is only this moment, this choice, this opportunity to respond with wisdom rather than react from habit. I think of a man named Robert who spent 10 years in prison for a crime he committed in his 20s. When he was released, he was 40 years old, with a record, no job, no prospects, and a deep sense of shame. He believed he was a criminal. That was his identity. One day, a volunteer at a halfway house gave him a book about Buddhism. In it, he read about emptiness, about no self, about the possibility of change. Something clicked. He realized that the Robert who had committed that crime was not the same Robert sitting in that room. That Robert was gone, a collection of causes and conditions that no longer existed. The shame he carried was a ghost, a memory mistaken for identity. Robert did not use this insight to escape responsibility. He used it to rebuild his life. He got a job, mended relationships, became a mentor to young people at risk. He often told them, "You are not your worst moment. You are not your past. You are what you choose, moment by moment, to become." This is emptiness in action. This is freedom lived. The great sage Nagarjuna wrote that emptiness is the middle way between existence and non-existence. Things are not nothing. They are also not the solid, permanent things we take them to be. They are dependently arisen, momentarily appearing, deeply connected, and utterly alive. So as we move forward, consider what would change in your life if you truly lived from this understanding. What would happen if you stopped believing so completely in the solidity of your problems? What would happen if you saw your anxiety as weather rather than identity? What would happen if you recognized that the person who hurt you is also a process, also a river, also capable of change? Take another breath with me. A long, slow inhale, filling your lungs completely, and then a gentle exhale, releasing everything. There is no rush. We are in no hurry to arrive anywhere. We have been exploring the practical dimensions of emptiness, how this ancient teaching touches your actual lived experience. Now I want to share a story about a man named Marcus who worked as a high school teacher in a difficult school. Marcus loved his students, but he struggled daily with frustration, with anger at their behavior, with despair at their circumstances. He would go home every evening exhausted, replaying conversations, imagining what he should have said, how he should have handled things differently. One afternoon, a student named Jamal exploded in his class. He knocked over a desk, shouted obscenities, and stormed out. Marcus felt the familiar surge of anger rise in his chest. But something made him pause. Instead of following Jamal to discipline him, instead of launching into the mental story about disrespect and failure, he just sat with the feeling. He felt the heat in his chest, the tension in his shoulders, the rapid beat of his heart. And as he sat with it, he noticed something strange. The anger was not a solid thing. It was a collection of sensations, constantly changing. Heat, then pressure, then a throbbing, then a cooling. It was like watching a storm pass across the sky. It came. It stayed for a while. And then it began to leave on its own. Marcus realized in that moment that he did not have to do anything with his anger. He did not have to act on it. He did not have to suppress it. He did not have to justify it. He could simply feel it, watch it, let it be there without letting it control him. This is emptiness applied to emotion. Emotions are empty too. They have no solid, independent existence. They arise from conditions, they persist for a time, and when the conditions change, they pass away. They are visitors, not permanent residents. They are weather, not climate. Marcus went looking for Jamal later that day. He found him sitting alone in the stairwell, head in his hands. Marcus sat down next to him, not saying anything. After a long silence, Jamal spoke. He talked about his mother working 2 jobs, his little sister being sick, his father in prison. He talked about the weight he carried every day into that classroom. Marcus listened. And in that listening, he felt no anger, no judgment, no need to fix anything. Just presence. Just being with another human being in their suffering. Jamal came back to class the next day. Something had shifted between them. Not because Marcus had said the right thing or done the right thing, but because he had been present. He had seen through the solidity of his anger and discovered the space to simply be there. This is what emptiness makes possible. It creates space. When you stop believing that your anger is a solid thing that demands expression, space appears. When you stop believing that your anxiety is a permanent condition that defines you, space appears. When you stop believing that the person who hurt you is a fixed, unchanging villain, space appears. And in that space, something new becomes possible. Understanding. Compassion. Choice. I think of a woman named Nora whose father had abandoned the family when she was a child. She carried this wound for 40 years. She told herself stories about him, about his cruelty, his selfishness, his failure to love her. These stories became her identity. She was the daughter of the man who left. One day, at a family gathering, she saw an old photograph of her father as a young man, before she was born. He was laughing, his arm around a friend, his eyes full of life. She looked at this stranger and realized something for the first time. He was not just the father who left. He was also the son of someone, the friend of someone, a young man with dreams and fears and his own wounds. He was not a single, solid villain. He was a process, a life, a collection of causes and conditions that led him to make choices she would never understand. This realization did not excuse what he had done. It did not erase the pain. But it cracked something open. The solid story she had been carrying began to soften. The villain became a human being. And in that softening, Nora felt something she had not felt in 40 years. Not forgiveness exactly. Just release. Just a little more space in her heart. This is the gift of emptiness. It softens the hard edges of our stories. It reminds us that nothing and no one is reducible to a single label. The person who cut you off in traffic is also someone's beloved. The politician you despise is also a parent, also afraid, also doing the best they can with the causes and conditions that shape them. This is not naivety. This is not pretending that harm is not real. It is seeing clearly that harm, like everything else, arises from conditions. And if we want to change the harm, we must address the conditions, not just battle with the ghost of a solid enemy. The world is crying out for this understanding. Every conflict, every war, every act of violence is fueled by the belief in solid identities, solid enemies, solid righteousness. When we see through that solidity, when we touch the emptiness of fixed views, we become agents of peace. Not passive peace, but active, engaged peace that sees clearly and responds wisely. Let us continue this journey together. Take a breath, a long, gentle breath, and as you exhale, feel yourself settling more deeply into the present moment. There is nothing to achieve here, nothing to become. Just this. We have explored how emptiness transforms our relationship with emotions and with others. Now I want to share a story about a woman named Lena who was a successful artist. Lena's paintings had been exhibited in galleries around the world. Critics praised her unique vision. Collectors paid high prices for her work. And yet Lena lived in constant fear. Fear that her next painting would not be good enough. Fear that she had already peaked, that her best work was behind her. Fear that one day everyone would discover she was a fraud. This fear had a name in the creative world. They call it imposter syndrome. The sense that you are not really who everyone thinks you are, that you have somehow fooled everyone, and that at any moment you will be exposed. Lena lived with this fear every single day. It drove her to work obsessively, to doubt every brushstroke, to lie awake at night replaying every criticism. One afternoon, a young artist came to visit her studio. She was just starting out, full of enthusiasm and uncertainty. She looked at Lena's paintings with awe and said, "I hope one day I can be a real artist like you." Lena looked at this young woman and felt a wave of compassion. She also felt the familiar stab of irony. If only she knew, Lena thought. If only she knew how unreal I feel. And then something clicked. In that moment, Lena realized that the imposter syndrome was not a problem to be solved. It was a pointer to the truth. Of course she felt like an imposter. Because the self that was supposed to be a real artist, a solid, accomplished, undeniable artist, that self did not exist. There was no solid Lena to be a real artist. There was only painting. There was only the act of creating, brush moving across canvas, color meeting color, image emerging from imagination. The fear came from believing she had to be someone. The freedom came from realizing she did not have to be anyone at all. This is emptiness applied to identity. We spend our lives trying to become someone. Someone successful. Someone loved. Someone respected. Someone who matters. And the irony is that the someone we are trying to become is a fiction. It is a collection of concepts, an image in the mind. The effort to become someone is the source of so much suffering. The fear of not being enough, the anxiety about what others think, the endless striving for more, all of it rests on the belief that there is a solid self that needs to be established, defended, and enhanced. When emptiness is understood, the whole project of becoming someone begins to dissolve. Not because you stop caring, but because you see through the illusion. You realize that you do not need to become anyone. You are already here. You are already aware. You are already participating in the miracle of existence. The striving can relax. The fear can soften. And in that relaxation, something remarkable happens. You become more creative, not less. You become more loving, not less. You become more effective, not less. Because you are no longer paralyzed by the need to protect an image. You are free to respond, to create, to love, to act, without the constant background noise of self-concern. I think of a man named Derek who was a public speaker. He traveled the country giving talks to large audiences. He was charismatic, engaging, funny. But privately, he was a wreck. Before every talk, he would experience debilitating anxiety. His heart would race, his palms would sweat, his mind would flood with catastrophic thoughts. What if they booed? What if he forgot his lines? What if they saw through him? One day, before a particularly important talk, the anxiety was overwhelming. He sat in his dressing room, convinced he could not go on. And then he remembered something a therapist had told him years ago. Notice the anxiety, she had said. Don't try to make it go away. Just notice it. So he sat there and he noticed. He noticed the racing heart. He noticed the sweaty palms. He noticed the catastrophic thoughts. And as he noticed, he realized something. The anxiety was not a wall between him and the audience. It was just energy. It was just sensation. It was just thinking. And underneath it all, there was awareness. Calm, steady, present awareness that was watching the whole show. Derek walked on stage that night not without anxiety, but with anxiety. He did not fight it. He did not try to be someone else. He just spoke, and the anxiety was part of the experience, part of the aliveness of the moment. Afterward, people told him it was his best talk ever. He had been more present, more authentic, more connected. The anxiety had not ruined anything. It had simply been there, and he had let it be there. This is the freedom of emptiness. You do not have to become someone else. You do not have to fix yourself. You do not have to wait until you are ready, until you are perfect, until you have it all together. You can show up as you are, right now, with all your fears and doubts and imperfections, and discover that you are enough. Not because you have achieved enough, but because the self that needed to achieve enough was never real. What is real is this moment, this presence, this life, flowing through you, asking nothing more than to be lived fully. We have arrived at the end of our journey together. Take a long, slow breath, and as you exhale, feel the gratitude that comes from having spent this time in deep exploration. You have stayed with this through many words, many stories, many dimensions of a teaching that has the power to transform everything. Let us return one last time to the image I offered at the very beginning. The image of the open hand. Remember how it felt to clench your fist tightly, holding on to certainty, grasping at answers, refusing to let go. And remember the release, the opening, the surrender. This journey through emptiness has been an invitation to open your hand. To release your grip on the self you thought you were. To release your grip on the world you thought was solid. To release your grip on the division between inside and outside. To release your grip on the views you held so tightly, even the spiritual ones. And in that opening, to discover something that was always there. Not a new belief, not a better philosophy, not a more advanced teaching. Just presence. Just awareness. Just the simple, undeniable fact of being alive in this moment, right here, right now. I want to share one final story with you. It is about a woman named Clara who spent her life searching. She searched through religions, through therapies, through relationships, through careers. She read hundreds of books, attended countless workshops, traveled to distant countries. She was determined to find the truth, to understand the nature of reality, to become enlightened. Everyone who knew her admired her dedication. She was a true seeker. After decades of searching, Clara found herself in a small hut in the mountains of Nepal, talking with an old meditation teacher. She told him the whole story of her search, all the teachers she had studied with, all the practices she had done, all the insights she had accumulated. She waited for his approval, his confirmation that she was on the right path. The old teacher looked at her with kind eyes and said, "You have been searching for something very far away. But what you are looking for has been with you the entire time. It is the one who is searching. It is the awareness in which all your searching appears. You have been so busy looking outward that you never turned around to see who is looking." Clara was stunned. In that moment, the whole edifice of her searching collapsed. Not into despair, but into recognition. She had been seeking truth as if it were an object to be found, a destination to be reached, a state to be achieved. But the truth was not an object. It was the subject. It was the awareness reading these words right now. It was the presence listening to this voice. It was what she had always been, before she ever started searching. This is the final gift of emptiness. It turns your attention around. It invites you to stop looking for answers out there and to recognize the awareness in here. Not as another object of knowledge, but as the knowing itself. Not as something you can grasp, but as the one who is always already here, even before the grasping begins. The great sage Ramana Maharshi used to ask his students a single question: who am I? Not as a philosophical inquiry, but as a living investigation. Trace the source of the sense of self. Follow the feeling of I back to its origin. And what you find at the source is not a thing, not a person, not an identity. It is pure awareness, without form, without limit, without beginning or end. It is what the Buddhists call your Buddha nature. It is what the Hindus call Atman. It is what mystics across every tradition have pointed to. It is what you are. Now, here is the paradox. Even this recognition must be released. Even the discovery of your true nature can become another thing to grasp, another identity to protect, another view to defend. I am enlightened. I am awareness. I am the screen, not the movie. These are beautiful understandings, but they are still understandings. They are still fingers pointing at the moon. The moon itself cannot be grasped. It can only be seen. And the seeing happens not in time, not as an achievement, but in this very moment, when the searching stops and there is just this. Just the sound of my voice. Just the feeling of your breath. Just the presence that knows both. That presence is what you are. It has always been what you are. It will always be what you are. Forms change, thoughts come and go, sensations arise and pass, but the awareness in which all of this appears does not change. It is the one constant in your entire experience. You have never been without it. You could not be without it. It is closer than your breath, nearer than your thoughts. It is the home you have been seeking in every relationship, every achievement, every acquisition. And the good news is, you do not have to find it. You only have to recognize that you have never lost it. As we bring this long exploration to a close, I want to leave you with a simple practice. Several times a day, just pause. Pause for 5 seconds. Stop whatever you are doing. Take a breath. And ask yourself, what is aware of this moment? What is it that is hearing these sounds, seeing these sights, feeling these sensations? Do not answer with words. Just turn your attention around and notice the noticing itself. Even 1 second of this, repeated many times, can change the trajectory of your life. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a self to be improved. You are not a journey to be completed. You are the awareness in which all problems, all selves, all journeys appear and disappear. You are what the mystics call the unborn, the undying, the unconditioned. You are what the Buddha called the deathless. You are what Christ called the kingdom of heaven within. And now, even these words must be released. Even this teaching must be let go. The raft has carried you across the river. Leave it on the shore. The finger has pointed at the moon. Look at the moon, not the finger. Thank you for spending this time with me at Monk's Moon Temple. Thank you for your attention, your openness, your willingness to explore the depths. If this journey has touched you, if something has opened or shifted or softened, please share it with others who might benefit. Share this video. Share these teachings. And if you have not already, consider subscribing so we can continue exploring together. Until we meet again, may you rest in the awareness that you have always been. May you know the peace that is not found but recognized. May you live with an open hand and an open heart. What you seek has been seeking you, and it has finally found itself as you. Goodbye, dear friend. Safe travels on the path that was never really a path, going toward a destination that was never really a way.